Mental health services have changed a lot over the last 40 years. When I started, most of the service was delivered from the asylums. And I remember back in the days when the beds were 2 foot apart, the patients were defined by the wards they were in. So one ward would be, say, people in that would be schizophrenics. Another ward would be people with learning difficulties. There'd be ranges of different wards that really defined the patient. Then gradually we started working with people in the community as well as having the hospital bases. By the early 90s, we began to do some reasonably good science. Proper studies were done, proper outcome studies, proper controlled trials were done. But these were statistic and large numbers. And what we began to do was lose the story of the individual.
Unless one knows the background of somebody, you don't know where they're travelling from and travelling to. People have complex lives, and the fact is that their background does very much affect them going forward. Not enough emphasis is placed on background, family, childhood, and other relationships.
I like spending time alone, just to reflect on where I'm at. If I'm not in a very good space, then it's best to be on my own, really. I've been in the services since I was 5 years of age, and I'm not ashamed because I wasn't born like this. I live with a legacy, and the perpetrators are dead. Some of it happened within the family home, but the others escaped it. Wrong place, wrong time.
When I was first diagnosed with a mental illness, I was 21, newly married, baby. All of a sudden I became a breadwinner, a husband, a tenant in a house, and it just proved too much for me and my body wasn't prepared for it. And I had a massive nervous breakdown, took an overdose, ended up down Trellisk having my stomach pumped out, discharged, letter for the GP, prescription for antidepressants, sick note, that was it. And I think that if they only had gone into what had triggered it, my life could have been totally different.
In my opinion, as I have become an older and hopefully wiser GP, I found that there is often a key to why people have become ill, which wasn't necessarily obvious initially. My brother became very seriously ill in his mid-30s and was the most admitted patient to Trengeath. His treatment, unfortunately, was very counterproductive for him, and he became iller. I had to go and get him out of jail at Camborne twice. These things are really profound in a family, and I think that people, unless they've actually experienced them themselves, just don't understand just how traumatic it is having somebody with a serious mental health problem within a family. It's generally recognized that each person with schizophrenia affects 10 close family members, and it really is nothing short of a maelstrom.
I find it very difficult to get close to people. At this moment in time, today, for the first time, I feel a connection with my CPN and my consultant, and finally, a GP that will listen. And that is what stops me from going that little step over the edge at the moment.
It wasn't until I was transferred to the books of another GP within the practice, I found that this doctor had time for me. If I wanted to talk, she always found time to listen. It wasn't just here's a prescription for some more antidepressants, here's a sick note for another 6 weeks, see when it runs out. It's thanks to her now that I've taken up control of my illness and it doesn't control me so much now. I can do things now. I can face getting up in the mornings, I can face people, which is one thing I couldn't do for a long time. So yes, I thank my lucky stars I was given that chance with this GP.
You don't always get people who've got the time and the knowledge and the space to listen and really hear what the patient is saying, but they have to fit in a criteria, and more recently we're becoming more information technology based, so people would have a risk assessment, again, which is valuable, but the risk assessment tends to define the patient rather than the patient's context define the risk assessment.
The individual's needs in mental health services are bound to vary, and the fact that you have payments by results rather infers that there are going to be activities stopping and starting, while the reality is that for many people with more serious mental health problems, they're going to require services over very protracted periods of time.
Working with people's stories and working with their narrative is a trust thing, and you have to earn people's trust to do it. And I think it's very important that, in a way, when we listen to somebody's story and we hold that story, we bear witness to who they are and what has happened to them.
There's no Smarties for it. They give you tablets to try and alleviate certain symptoms for a period of time. The trauma has I'm sure it's affected my brain badly, and I think that's why I'll never ever know who I really am.
The message I would like to leave with you today, and the question I'd like to raise for you to discuss, is that while you're dealing with the issues about new developments in mental health, how can we spread the butter, which is getting thinner, and still offer services, not to forget the narrative, not to forget the individual. We've had a history of 40 years in psychiatry that I've worked in it, whereby the narrative was lost originally, the original patients were labelled in the asylum, and the service was driven by the asylum. We're coming round again, I'm afraid, to services that are driven by the tariff, by the resources, and less driven by the need of the individual. And how we can address this, I believe very strongly, is that we can actually hear each individual's narrative and take this narrative seriously, respectfully, and hold it.